Dear learners, welcome again in this Swayam MOOC course on environmental politics, theories, concepts and debate. Week 5, lecture 5, titled Future Prospects for Environmental Governance, in which we will be discussing the youth-led movements and grassroots movement plus digital technology and its impact. What are the potential of green alliances and coalitions in the governance? And further, we will also be discussing the future prospects of environmental governance. So let's begin with that. So this is the outline of the lecture which I have just mentioned with you all, in which we will be discussing the role of youth activism and grassroots movements, digital technology and its impact on environmental advocacy, the potential for green alliances and coalitions in the governance, that how the green party, when it's become the part of any coalition or alliance, so how they are going to influence the decision making processes of the government, and what will be the predictions for the future influence of green parties and pressure groups. So here, firstly, we can see that as an introduction, the future of environmental politics will be defined by dynamic shifts in activism, technology, and governance. And here, youth led movements like Fridays for Future are reshaping the policy agendas with demands for urgent climate action, while digital tools amplify advocacy through social media campaigns and data driven accountability. Here, Green parties once niche now wield growing influence in coalition governments, particularly in Europe, as we have discussed in the previous lectures, that how gradually it emerged in the European countries, started from Germany, and it pushes sustainability into mainstream politics. Meanwhile, unexpected alliances may emerge as climate crises force traditional rivals to collaborate, whether through green conservatism or progressive coalitions. So here the question comes ki, what do you mean by the green conservatism? So basically it is an ideology which merges the traditional conservative values like economic growth, fiscal responsibility with environmental stewardships, and it rejects the radical environmentalism in favor of economic capabilities. So here in this regard, we can take the example of economic capitalists like Elon Musk, who advocates for the market solutions, like he talked about Tesla, which is totally a battery driven car, and also talked about, advocated about the carbon credits. So here we can see that yet challenges are there, including corporate resistance, which is very very important, and as we have discussed in the previous lecture, which is exclusively about the what kind of challenges pressure groups and green parties are facing, in which corporate resistance was very very important. Along with that, political short termism and the risk of greenwashing, what is called greenwashing, which we have discussed in the previous lectures. So in this regard, coming decades will test whether environmentalism can transition from protest to lasting systematic change. And here, as ecological threats intensify, environmental politics may either fracture along ideological lines or unite across borders, determining whether humanity can achieve a just transition to sustainability. And here, the movement's success will hinge on its ability to merge grassroots energy with institutional power while navigating an increasingly volatile geopolitical landscape. Now we will be coming to the what is the role of youth activism and grassroots movement. So here, youth activism and grassroots movements have become a very powerful force in the environmental politics. Through what? Through the awareness campaign, through the community engagement, as we have discussed in the previous lectures too, that how WWF, how Fridays for the Future have connected the people with this global and transnational issue, which is very very important. It also plays an important role in driving awareness, shaping the public opinion in favor of environmental protection, and also through this, also pressurizing the governments and corporations to adopt the eco-friendly policies. So in this regard, we can see that to take urgent action on climate change and ecological degradation. To prevent the ecological degradation, that is one of the major agendas of youth activism and grassroots movement. And in this regard, we can take the example like through these movements, which are often led by the young people and local communities, they have redefined environmental advocacy by emphasizing inclusivity. Inclusivity is what? That is to include the native people and indigenous people in this process of environmental protection. That their voices should also be heard in this regard. Then we can see how it is quite urgent, the urgency of this problem, and of course a systematic change that is only possible through incorporating the sustainable and eco-friendly practices. And here their impact is evident in the way they have mobilized millions of people across the world to influence the policy agendas and brought environmental issues to the forefront of global discourse. One of the most prominent examples of youth activism in this regard is the Fridays for Future movement, which is founded by a Swedish activist. She is very, very young, Greta Thunberg, in 2018. And here, when we will see this movement, so this movement has successfully pressurized governments to declare climate emergencies, which was very much heard in the Sweden, to adopt more ambitious carbon reduction targets, and also prioritize environmental issues in the political agendas. As we have seen in the previous lectures, that how initially and even during this phase in the contemporary time too, that whenever we talk about the political agendas, so that all are basically dominated by the economic growth, employment, infrastructural development, how to do the economic development more and more. So in this regard, they have also pressurized the government to incorporate the climate friendly policies. And here, by framing climate change as an intergenerational justice issue, here youth activists have highlighted the disproportionate burden that younger and future generations will bear. And that's why they urge for the sustainable development. And what is sustainable development? To use the resources, especially the natural resources, in that way, so that we can preserve the natural resources for our coming and future generation too. So here, if immediate action is not taken, then that will be very will create a very alarming situation. And here, grassroots movements often rooted in local communities. The role of local communities are very, very critical in addressing the environmental issues at the ground level. So what began as a solitary school strike for climate action, which has grown into a global phenomena, with millions of students and young people participating in strikes and demonstrations to demand stronger climate policies. As we have discussed in the very beginning, that how it was specifically in the context of Sweden, it was initiated by Greta Thunberg through her Fridays for Future movement. Now we can see that these movement focuses on specific challenges like deforestation, that was the cutting of the trees, water pollution, which is very, very important, then the fossil fuel extraction, and of course the biodiversity loss. And here we can see that such initiatives, such movements are often led by the indigenous people. As I mentioned in between, that how indigenous people can play a very important role, native people can play a very important role in this regard, farmers, the cultivators, and of course the marginalized communities, those life are very much dependent on the nature, who are directly affected by the environmental degradation. So here the strength of youth activism and grassroots movements lies in their ability to mobilize diverse groups and to create a sense of collective urgency. That is very, very important. Collective urgency is what? That it's a kind of like we all have to initiate together, because it's not a kind of national urgency or a local urgency, but it is a kind of collective urgency, as I told you all in the previous classes too, that how the nature of environmentalism is a transnational, has a transnational character. So through social media, these movements have amplified their reach, organized global campaigns, and fostered solidarity across borders. And in this regard, we can take some of the examples like hashtags climate strike, then hashtag Fridays for future, and hashtag save the Amazon have become rallying cries for environmental action, enabling activists to share stories, coordinate actions, and hold decision makers accountable. And this digital activism has democratized environmental advocacy, allowing even small local movements to gain visibility and support. Youth activists use platforms like Instagram, Twitter, which is now called as X handle, to spread climate science, expose corporate greenwashing, and also hold leaders accountable for such degradation. And in this context, we can see that grassroots organizations have achieved concrete policy wins, from influencing the European climate law, which is very important here, to stopping major fossil fuel projects. Like the example is here as the Keystone XL pipeline, which was very much like responsible for the secretion of greenhouse gases, while simultaneously pressurizing the institutions to divest trillions from fossil fuels. And in this context, these movements employ diverse tactics that blend. So this traditional protest is what? That was the, like, traditionally we can see that the people are protesting the government and the corporates coming on the streets, roads and all. So now it is blended with the digital activism, how they are using the social media network as a platform to spread their views among the people, and that is totally beyond the boundaries. Fine. And of course the institutional engagement, and through these, I mean, activism and these movements, they are also compelling the government to initiate such policies in this regard. And in this context, extinction rebellions, civil disobedience campaigns, forced climate emergency declarations in multiple countries. Like we can see in this regard, we can see the Sunrise Movement, which successfully lobbied for climate provisions in major legislations like US Inflation Reduction Act that was passed in America. Along with that, indigenous-led resistance exemplified by the Standing Rock protest against the Dakota Access Pipeline, which has highlighted the intersection of environmental justice with colonial legacies and racial inequalities, and which is very much like general to see in the third world countries, whether it is Latin America, Asia, and Africa. Then here we can see that these movement also faces significant challenges, which may include political repression through the anti-protest laws which are passed by the governments, burnout among the activists themselves, and also criticism about the inclusivity of leadership roles, which we have also discussed in the what kind of problems they faced internally, the green parties and the green led movements. And here some tactics have drawn backlash for being overly confrontational or dominated by the privileged Western voices, prompting calls for more decentralized, community-based approaches that center frontline population which are most affected by the climate change. But despite these challenges, even youth climate activism continues to evolve and expand its influence. And here, youth activists are increasingly transitioning from protest to political office while maintaining pressure through international networks that coordinate actions across borders. And it encompasses from the social media campaigns to AI driven climate models. Here technology is empowering the activists, scientists and policymakers to address environmental challenges more effectively. Now here we can see that the movement's lasting impact lies not just in specific policy wins, but it is also based on fundamentally altering how societies perceive the climate crisis, which is very, very important, because such kind of experience, such kind of feeling should be there. And here no longer as a distant environmental issue, but as an immediate political priority which demands the systematic transformation. So as these activists mature their strategies and build broader coalitions, and they represent perhaps the most promising counterforce to institutional inertia on climate action. And here, though their ultimate success will depend on sustaining momentum while addressing internal tensions around representation and tactics too. So in this regard, the rise of youth climate movements marks a historic shift in environmental politics, which is basically proving that how organized grassroots pressure can disrupt the business as usual, and also compelling the governments to respond to scientific realities in the context of environmental degradation with unprecedented urgency. Now we will be discussing what is digital technology and its impact on environmental advocacy. So here we can see that digital technology has revolutionized environmental advocacy, also transformed the activists, that how they are going to organize, communicate and mobilize the support of people for this ecological causes. And it is done for enhancing awareness, improving the data collection and also enabling the global collaboration. And here in the context, as I told you all in the beginning, that how the nature of environmental problems, environmental degradation is of transnational, so that's why we need a transnational solution too. And here, to connect the people worldwide, here this digital technology is playing very, very important and fundamental role. So here digital technology fosters global connectivity. It also enables the activists to collaborate across the borders, and also influencing them to organize large scale events like global climate strikes. So here we can see that it increases awareness and mobilization by social media and digital campaigns by through the platforms like Twitter, Instagram, to help the environmental organizations, like as we have seen the environmental pressure groups like Greenpeace, Extinction Rebellion, WWF, etc. And here, through this digital platform, they try to spread message quickly, mobilizing the protest and also pressurizing the corporations and the governments too, along with the campaigns like Fridays for Future, Save the Amazon, which has amplified global attention on climate issues. In this regard, we can see that the data collection and monitoring is done also by the satellite imaging and remote sensing, which is very much important in the context of advancement in the digital technology. And here some of the tools like Google Earth Engine and NASA satellite data to track deforestation, glacier melt and pollution in real time. So in the context of the digital technology, here we are also seeing the use of AI and big data for environmental solutions, basically for predictive analytics, for forecast the extreme weather events, and also helping the communities to prepare for disasters. As we have seen that such techniques are also used to forecast, to predict the tsunami and other natural disasters like earthquake, etc. So here machine learning identifies poaching hotspots like PAWS AI and tracks endangered species for wildlife protection. And here some of the apps are also there like Zolberg and EcoCart for carbon footprint tracking to help individuals and businesses to reduce the emissions of greenhouse gases. Here we can see that apart from all these, the use of blockchain for transparency, that is just to verify sustainable sourcing. What is sustainable sourcing? Or it is in which context? So it is in the context of the how we are, using, or we are like following these sustainable practices. So here for example we can see the an important MNC, that is IBM's, its food trust for deforestation free products, and also the carbon credit systems to ensure transparency in carbon offset programs of digital ledgers. And so now we can see here that the incorporation of virtual and augmented reality for education by immersive simulations like Tree VR, that is very, very important to help people in visualizing deforestation and climate impacts. And also some apps are here like WWF Free Rivers, that is to educate the users on ecosystem conservation. And here the digital activism and policy influence is basically done by the online petitions. What is online petitions, which we have also discussed in the previous lectures? Like some of the examples are here like change.org, Awaaz, to rapidify and gather global support for environmental policies, and also organizing like hackathons and crowdsourcing by the tech communities to develop solutions which are needed for environmental conservation. So in the context of it, online petitions and advocacy tools, as I have mentioned the name of change.org, which allows individual to campaign for policy changes, while artificial intelligence and big data analytics provide evidence-based insights to address environmental challenges. But even though we can see that digital advocacy is not without its challenges, here we can see that misinformation, greenwashing by vested interest can undermine the efforts, while digital divides, which is very, very detrimental here, exclude the marginalized communities from participating fully in online activism. Along with that, the environmental footprint of digital technology, including e-waste and energy consumption, poses its own ecological challenges. So now here we can see that this digital technology has significantly strengthened environmental advocacy by improving communication, data accuracy, and activism reach. But even though we can see that balancing tax benefits with sustainability, like reducing e-waste, which is very, very crucial for the long-term impact. And here some of the important innovations like AI and blockchain evolve, they will play an even greater role in shaping a green future. But despite all these several advantages, some of the major challenges and criticisms are too, like e-waste and carbon footprint. And here data centers and devices contribute to pollution. Sustainable tech solutions are needed. Then here we can see the misinformation, like through the digital platform, we can see like any kind of information can be very viral very soon. So here fake news and greenwashing can mislead the people. And also the digital divide, which is very, very important limitation in this regard, which is not able to connect all the communities together, and also not ensuring the equal access to technology, and limiting their inclusivity in advocacy. Now we will come up to the what are the potentials for green coalitions and the alliances in governance. What does it mean? It means that once the Green Party becomes the part of any coalition, as we have seen in some of the party coalition governments are very normal and common kind of. So once they become the part of it, so how they are influencing the environmental governance means कि how they are compelling the government to incorporate the sustainable practices and eco-friendly policies. So here we can see that the potential for green coalitions and alliances in governance, which is grown as a very significant and important one to the environmental concerns, which move from the political periphery, as we have discussed in the previous lectures, that how during the Cold War, how such issues were considered as the part of low politics. But gradually we have seen in the post-Cold War era that how gradually the issues of low politics become the part of high politics. So what I tried to explain it here. And here we can see that through creating new opportunities for policy influence while presenting unique challenges. So here traditionally marginalized green parties and environmental movements are increasingly becoming kingmakers in fragmented political landscapes, particularly in Europe, where proportional representation system allow smaller parties to play a very important role in the coalition governments. For example, we can see that Germany's experience with the Greens in governing coalition, first with the Social Democrats, which was there from 1998 to 2005, and more recently in the Traffic Light Coalition, which is from 2021 till date. Here it demonstrates that how environmental parties can leverage their position to advance climate legislation, renewable energy transitions, and sustainability policies even when they don't hold the chancellorship. In this regard, we can also see that similar patterns have emerged in Finland, where the Green League has participated in multiple governing coalitions, and in smaller European nations like Ireland, Belgium, where green parties have traded cabinet positions for progressive environmental reforms. And here we can see that beyond the formal party politics, here green alliances are forming between the environmental groups, labor unions, indigenous organizations, and progressive business associations to create broader movements for systematic change. In this regard, we can see that the Green New Deal framework, which was originated in US America but has inspired similar initiatives globally. I mean, some of the countries inspired from it, and they have also initiated such policies, exemplifies that how environmental policy can become a unifying platform that connects climate action with job creation, racial justice, and also the economic transformation. So in this context, in the global south means the third world countries, that basically comprises Latin America, Asia, and Africa, and whole of this region is termed as global south. So here we can see that here innovative coalitions are emerging between climate activists, development NGOs, and agricultural cooperatives, and here to advance both poverty reduction, which is very very important here in the global south, and also the environmental sustainability, which is the part of global agenda, as seen in Costa Rica's pioneering decarbonization strategy, or even we can take the example of Kenya community led renewable energy projects. Along with that, we can see in Costa Rica there is also Latin American Water Tribunal, which is basically a citizen-led environmental justice system where affected communities bring cases against the polluters, those who are responsible for pollution. This extrajudicial body has ruled around 35 plus cases since 2000, and including forcing a banana company to compensate Ecuadorian farmers for pesticide contamination, demonstrating how grassroots legal innovations can hold corporations accountable. Now we will be coming to that how green coalitions are not limited to national governments, but they're also playing a pivotal role at local and regional level too. Here in the municipal and regional alliances between the green parties, progressive groups and local stakeholders, which have successfully implemented sustainable urban planning, public transportation initiatives and also the renewable energy projects, and here which is beyond formal political alliances. Green parties often collaborate with the grassroots movements, like here we can take the example of Fridays for Future, which is there in Sweden, started from Sweden, non-governmental organizations and also international organizations like WTO, IMF, World Bank, to strengthen their advocacy and policy influence. And in this regard, as I have just given the example or mentioned the name of Fridays for Future, so along with Fridays for Future, here is Extinction Rebellion, those who have aligned with green parties to amplify their demands for climate action, creating a powerful synergy between the street level activism and political representation. And these partnerships help to bridge the gap between protest and policy, ensuring that grassroots energy translates into tangible legislative outcomes. So here we can see that however these green coalitions face substantial obstacles in maintaining the unity and translating influence into lasting change or sustainable change. It means the inherent tension between the radical environmental activists and pragmatic policymakers often surfaces when green parties enter into the government, and moreover the green alliances risk being co-opted or neutralized by traditional parties that adopt environmental rhetoric without substantive action, a phenomena which is very much evident here as greenwashing of center right parties across Europe and North America. And here the future potential of green governance alliances may depend on their ability to broaden their appeal beyond environmental issues alone. So here we can see that successful models increasingly frame sustainability as integral to economic security, public health, national resilience, and as climate change impacts intensifies and political system continues to fragment, the space for innovative green coalitions will likely to expand, though their long-term effectiveness will hinge on navigating ideological differences, maintaining grassroots pressures, and delivering tangible improvements that build public trust in this or in such ecological transformations. So now we will come up with the what are the predictions for the future influence of green parties and pressure groups. So here we can see that the future which is going to influence the green parties and also the future influence of green parties and environmental pressure groups is expected to grow significantly as climate change, biodiversity loss and other ecological crises become increasingly urgent and central to public and private, and other ecological crises become increasingly urgent and central to public and political agendas. And here green parties like Germany's alliances 90 or the Greens and the France EELV are increasingly becoming pivotal players in coalition governments pushing ambitious climate policies such as carbon pricing and renewable energy mandates. And here we can see that by the 2030, they may transition from marginal actors to essential kingmakers in multiple legislature, rising public opinion fueled by visible impacts like extreme weather conditions and ecosystem collapse will drive demand for stronger environmental action, enhancing the relevance of green parties and pressure groups too. So on the whole, we can see that their growth faces several challenges like political polarization, particularly in US, Australia, and some of the other regions too, where climate policy remains contentious and resistance from far right movements, as we have seen in the backlash against emissions regulations in the Netherlands and in Germany too. In the same way, in global south, green movements are likely to gain traction by linking environmental justice with the social inequality, especially like in Brazil, India, where deforestation and industrial pollution disproportionately affect the marginalized communities. But meanwhile, we can see that environmental pressure groups are expected to grow more radical and technologically adept. Established NGOs like Greenpeace, Worldwide Fund will continue leveraging legal and corporate pressure campaigns, but newer, more confrontational groups like Just Stop Oil, Extinction Rebellion may escalate tactics which may include disruptive protest and digital activism too. And in this context, youth-led movements and the growing political engagements of younger, environmentally conscious voters will further bolster their influence, pushing mainstream parties to adopt green policies to remain competitive. And here, internationally, agreements like Paris Agreement of 2015 and the global push for the just transition to a sustainable economy will provide opportunities for these groups to shape further policies at both national and global level. In this regard, the rise of climate litigation, which is also exemplified, I have also mentioned in the previous lecture too, Agenda Foundation versus the Netherlands, where could also become a powerful tool to hold governments and corporations accountable. And in governance, green parties are likely to expand their influence through coalition building, particularly in the parliamentary form of systems, where they can partner with the traditional party just to advance the sustainable policies. And here we can see that the trajectory of these groups hinges on several factors, which may include the frequency of climate disasters in form of earthquake, in form of tsunami, economic shifts towards green industries, and the balance between the corporate lobbying and the public demand for sustainability. But even though there is an optimistic scenario where green parties could spearhead sweeping policy changes while pressure groups force systematic decarbonization, a more moderate outcome might see incremental progress amid political compromises, whereas a pessimistic turn could involve shifting crackdowns and fossil fuel industry resurgence. So ultimately, we can see that the movement success will depend on its ability, that how it is going to mobilize broad coalitions, adapt strategies, and withstand opposition, especially if a major climate event galvanizes public urgency or triggers authoritarian repression. The coming decades will test whether green politics can transition from activism to enduring institutional power. So now here we can see some of the activity questions, like how will youth-led movements like Fridays for Future is shaping the going to reshape traditional environmental advocacy strategies in the coming time, which I have also discussed in the slides. Then here we can see that to what extent can digital tools, whether it is social media platform, artificial intelligence, which is going to enhance the global reach and policy impact of environmental pressure groups. Along with that, thirdly, we can see that what conditions which are enabling the successful green rate coalitions between environmental politics parties and labor socialist movements in the electoral politics. And lastly, there is a question on which you can like analyze the whole of the slide and then can frame the answer, that will green parties transition from niche players to dominant political forces in post-industrial democracies by 2030? So here you can represent your own view. And these are the references which you may use as further reading. Thank you.